Corrine Malcolm returns. Last time we recorded, Corrine, there was an outpouring of demand that we do more of these newsy shows, as you and I have been talking about for a while. So here we are back again, talking about some of the action and trail running. Both of us finishing up long runs on a Saturday. How you doing?
Good. Yeah, not too long on this end, but I haven't been able to get out with my husband to run in forever because he's working just so many shifts as a medical resident and he had today off. And so scored a sweet kind of slow Saturday morning wake up into a really beautiful, very cold trail run on Tiger Mountain where we ran into really good friends, ran into Ben and Ellie, and then supposedly Ryan Thrower was behind them somewhere. We did not find Mr. Ryan Thrower, but yeah, running into good friends in the sunshine and frost was very, very cool.
Ryan Thrower allegedly dropped by Ben Gibbard and Ellie Gerben. We'll confirm whether or not that is accurate.
I can't imagine that's accurate, but I got a huge kick out of it.
Yeah, well, let's just pretend that Ryan got spit out the back of that small group and just to give him a hard time here on the podcast that he, of course, produces.
Crying on Tiger Mountain.
Corinne, I got to brag about my fitness.
Yeah.
I ran 18 miles today.
Damn, dude.
I think that's the longest I've run since August, and I'm feeling pretty proud of myself. Of course, my body felt awful, but my fueling was good, and my spirits were high, and it was great to be out there. And I'm going to break some news to you later, Corinne, about where I'm going to be racing, because my plans have changed a little bit in a way that I think might be interesting to you. We'll save that for later in the show.
Oh, I'm excited.
A big docket to get through here today, Corinne. First, I want to talk about the Stian episode that we released last week. I have been thinking about it for the last couple of days, and a few thoughts have percolated to the top of my head that I'd love to just toss at you and get a reaction on. We have some free agency updates that would be fun to just tick through. Also, some other individuals who we're still waiting on announcements for, including somebody who may be our co-host here today. We'll talk about that later. And then both the UTMB World Series and the World Trail Majors are officially underway as of last weekend and this weekend, respectively. So maybe we'll talk about some of the results and then tease where Corinne and I are going to be here in the upcoming weeks to cover some of these great golden ticket events that are happening very soon. Starting with Stian, Corinne, I had a couple of, thoughts, as I just said, but maybe first, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it or if any other comments come to mind for you as this case has become a little bit more public.
Yeah, I think the response was good. I think people came into it with open minds, which I think is really important, kind of critical thinking minds. It's really easy to sit on either side of it and say, well, I think they're a doper, or, well, I'm going to believe whatever I want, et cetera, and so on. But I do think people came in with open minds. And, part of me wonders too, like, culturally, we often don't give other countries maybe as much credit or as much leeway, right? So Russian athletes, Eastern African athletes, Ethiopia, Kenya, et cetera, we are a lot less maybe forgiving to when it comes to us thinking open-mindedly about doping allegations.
Yeah.
Because of historical precedents. Stian's, Scandinavian, a little bit different situation, easier for us in the sense that we're more open-minded. But at the same time, going into this case, it felt very lose-lose to me because it's one of two things, right?
Yep.
It's either someone that we care about and trust and respect has been lying to us and did do something wrong, or this person that we like and trust and respect had their career more than likely ruined for something that they weren't actually responsible for. And so it's kind of lose-lose in that situation where even though they've come to an agreement that allows Stian to come back to race this year, etc., out of sponsorship, out support from the community, will always have this thing hanging over his head. That's incredibly difficult. And so I'm still dealing with how bad that feels, I think.
Yeah. Well, thanks for those comments. And I feel very much the same. And in the spirit of this being sort of a lose-lose situation, I had some things that came to my mind about how we can use a lose-lose situation in order to triangulate towards a scenario in which anti-doping, the spirit of anti-doping is protected, but also where clean athletes are protected. So I've got a couple bullet points here. that I want to toss to you, get your reaction on. Number one, a detail from the conversation with Stian that I found interesting and potentially alarming. Like if I were an athlete in Stian's shoes, he made the request to test his samples to ensure that those samples matched his own DNA. He said on the podcast, I still don't know whether the samples that were tested were my samples. He has some suspicion that it was not his urine. And in the case where there is a positive result and you're going to be testing a B sample, I think to protect clean athletes, you should always be testing for DNA, not only to protect clean athletes, but to ensure total transparency and to ensure there is nothing that is still in question, right? And it feels strange to me that you would reject a request to test a sample for DNA. I know you have more thoughts on this.
Yeah, I would just say that it's not commonplace. It's not as if that is a usual request and a usual follow through from the French anti-doping agency or WADA or USADA. That's an unusual request in the sense that it's not part of normal practice, in part because the system generally should work well. The system, the people that are acting as witnesses and testers are well trained. They work within a specific system. There's a very well detailed, there's a detailed chain of custody, etc. The issue with Stian's case is that there was a lot of breakdown in that chain of custody.
Yep.
There was an incorrect date on the sample. The sample was then held at the witness / the anti-doping agent's house in a personal refrigerator for many days before going to the lab, like 4 or 5 days. So that is the bigger issue to me, is that there was a breakdown in chain of custody, which shouldn't happen and doesn't usually happen. And it's unfortunate that it happened in this case. And because that happened, I think the ask for DNA testing of the sample isn't crazy, isn't out of the question.
It's not unreasonable.
Because otherwise, I mean, in my mind, if I was the French anti-doping agency, Stian has a case for his case to be thrown out, right?
Yeah.
There is a case to be made for him to be found at no fault because of this chain of custody issue, because of this date issue in which the date was changed on the testing paperwork. All that's very bad and was very, very reasonable for the case to be thrown out altogether, to say, hey, no fault, our bad, Stian, do what you need to do. To validate the anti-doping agency and to validate the system, they should want to make sure that that is all rectified, and they didn't.
Exactly.
So they kind of came to this in between, and it's unfortunate that this all happened with the French anti-doping agency in the midst, and he's not a French athlete, in the midst of the Summer Olympics being held in Paris.
Yeah.
And so
my feeling is just that the AFLD should be their motivation to answer any and all outstanding questions. And the fact that they didn't want to go the extra step to test for DNA just for full transparency in a case that did have reasonable questions around it. To me, it just feels like if there's one of a couple of things that we could use to move forward from this, it should be that athletes should have a right to have their samples DNA tested in the case of a positive result, especially if they are protesting it. If they come out and admit, yes, I was using a banned substance, there's no reason to do a DNA test. And in Stian's case, especially as you mentioned, Corrine, with the breakdown of the chain of custody, you should be able to get total confirmation that that is indeed my sample and not somebody else's.
Particularly when it is on the athlete to prove. So in this case, right, it's not a false positive. There was something in the sample. So false positive gets used erroneously, right? This is a case of there was an adverse finding. There is something in the sample, but we are not sure how it was ingested or got into the individual's body and then came into the urine sample.
Yeah.
And so what happens, though, at that point in time is that it's up to the athlete to prove their innocence. It's up to the athlete to find the contamination. And, Stian and his partner spent tens of thousands of dollars.
50,000 euros they spent.
Doing hair and nail testing.
His entire savings, he said.
Yeah. Hair and nail testing, handwriting, testing, all sorts of things to evaluate fault. They contacted the hotel that they had been staying at, that A6 was staying at before UTMB, the hotel staff was all like they went back and they like questioned all the hotel staff to see if they were on any medications, because they were trying to find any potential source of contamination based on what they knew. And so it's kind of crazy. I don't know if this came up in the interview or not, but he also brought up to NRK that he had people reach out to him who told him that he should fabricate a prescription.
He did bring that up.
It's also crazy, right? Like, yeah, easily. Yeah. That'd be an easy out. Like, get a doctor to fabricate a prescription for his mom or his partner and backdate it and be like, oh, look, this is where the contamination came from. Huh, crazy. And it's like, he didn't do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. The whole thing sucks. It just sucks.
Yeah. Okay, well, we don't need to rehash all of it, but a couple other things I want to just toss up here. I'll just sort of lump a few of these bullets together and you can respond. Number one, an athlete should be informed of a positive or negative result within 2 weeks of the sample collection. One of the things that made Stian's reverse engineering and personal investigation into how this contamination may have occurred, what made it so difficult for him is that it took 50 days for him to even be informed of his positive result. There's, in my mind, no excuse that athletes, if you're going to be tested, give us our result immediately. Because in Stian's situation, having 50 days elapse without being able to begin an investigation to defend himself made it much harder for him to defend himself.
Yeah,
and
I think that's reasonable. That doesn't feel standard.
Doesn't feel standard, and especially because he said once he requested the testing of his B sample, they got those results back the next day. So
that's crazy.
It should just move quicker, especially in a case like where it's a world final, right? Like OCC was. Another thing that came to mind, athletes should have a right to accompany their sample from collection to a lab if they so choose. Of course, that's very inconvenient, especially when you've just run a very hard 50K at OCC. But an athlete or a member of the athlete's representation should be able to accompany their sample all the way to a lab. And the major detail that the listenership found surprising was the fact that the sample was stored at this official's private home.
Yeah, that seems weird, but I think accompanying it, like the way the system is set up, it shouldn't require accompaniment. Like that is why there are two samples. That is why, like, the locking mechanisms on these samples, the way they're packaged, the athlete does the packaging. Like, there are many safety nets put into place. Like, the athlete shouldn't have to accompany the sample. Like, that's insane. But again, I'm speaking
as an extremely paranoid person who's only been tested a couple of times, and in both cases,
by course, probably too, right?
Yeah, and in both cases, feeling like this was an egregious, just a totally inappropriate administering of anti-doping protocols where there was just, failures galore.
And I'm in the middle here where it's like, I want us to be able to trust the system, because that's paramount for anti-doping to be successful, is the athletes have to believe in the system.
Yeah.
And when stuff like this happens, it really, really shakes that belief.
Yeah. Okay. One other thing is, races who are administering anti-doping should be able to get the batch numbers of the nutrition products that are on course. And of course, we're all learning here. I'm not attaching blame to anybody here, but it's sort of like, how do we use this situation with Stian to move forward as a community? Mm-hmm. And I feel like this is a major learning, right? And most high quality nutrition brands now are doing third-party testing, NSF certification for sport to ensure there is not contamination of banned substances in those nutrition products. And so to go the extra mile, to have nutrition products that do have batch numbers attached to them where you can do an investigation of contamination in cases like Stian's, seems like something that's a reasonable ask.
And OCC is unique where there is no outside crew allowed. And so unless you're carrying all of your water and food for 55 kilometers, you are going to have to take material from the aid stations, which is different than not completely different, but is different than a 100-mile race where you do have crewable aid stations, or you've got crewable aid stations semi-frequently, where you are truly using your own nutrition. And it's a good reminder for athletes that you should know the batch and lot numbers of the supplements that you take and the nutrition products that you take. And I've asked Topher about this. I was like, hey, does it make sense for Western states to know the batch numbers of the packaged product on course, since we do anti-doping after the race? And so you're not going to know the batch numbers of bananas, but what about the goo product on course, right? That is something that we could, in theory, although it'd be a lot of work and it'd be complicated, but it might be worth it at the front end of the race to make sure you have that protection.
Yeah. And of course we should acknowledge that there would be a lot of, it's hard to predict how expensive and complicated that would be. But if we are going to be, to me, it feels like spare no expense in the spirit of clean sport and in the spirit of protecting clean athletes. Having nutrition products on the course when races are administering anti-doping that do have batch and lot numbers attached to them, it just removes these question marks that end up confusing everybody and creating,
totally.
lack of
but I would
certainty.
argue that we don't even know if the drink mix on course is mixed to the appropriate strength. How are we going to know which batch number of cookies makes it onto the aid station table, right? That is the complication.
Very fair point. Very fair point. Anyway, those were just a few of the thoughts that came to mind for me as it relates to Stian's case about how we can take these circumstances and do something positive with it. And I think over time, anti-doping is going to become more and more important in our sport. It'll become more and more part of the conversations that you and I have, Corrine, and that others have in the space. And so as long as we are making progress is good. But we should all aspire to, mitigate issues like what has happened with Stian, where there's just a lot of question marks and where it does feel like a lose-lose for the sport. One last thing that, I think is important to just touch on here, just so the audience is totally informed. As part of Stian's settlement agreement, as far as I understand, his result at the 2023 OCC has now been deleted, which means Francesco Puppi is now the official winner of the 2023 OCC. So I feel like that was just an important detail that I don't know is fully understood by the public that I wanted to bring up.
It will nullify that result. And then the agreement is backdated to the date of the sample collected, I believe, which means that Stian is now a month or so, 2 months clear of his 16-month ban. So can return to local competition. Norway is super strict on this stuff, i.e. Stian hasn't been able to use a public gym during this time period because that is banned in Norway for people under doping suspensions. Yeah.
He said he wasn't even able to participate in his local running club, stuff like that. So anyway, I was surprised that, I was expecting a little bit more blowback or a little bit more polarization from the show. I'm grateful Stian came on, and I'm grateful that, people seem to have listened with an open mind. We did, get some negative feedback, but it was all done in, the spirit of positivity and collaboration, and there were no personal attacks either to Freetrail or to Stian. So I was really grateful for that. Obviously, this is a really charged subject, and the fact that we could approach it in a way that, avoided, ad hominem attacks and divisiveness. I don't know. I find there's productivity in that.
We're in a post-Lance Armstrong era, particularly for North Americans, I would say, where we are a doper suck, once a doper, always a doper, once a doper, never trusted, found guilty of anything, burn them at the stake type of community, generally speaking, because, someone like Lance pulled the wool over our eyes, and it was a person that we admired and were rooting for, and to feel so cheated in it. But I will say many of these cases are not black and white. They're not all the same level. They're not all the same quality of badness akin to any sort of judicial process. It's not everyone's a murderer in this case. There are various degrees of suspensions bans, slaps on the wrist, etc. It's not a perfect system by any means, but it is a system that equates a certain degree of punishment to people. And I think that it can be very scaled as far as, ooh, you did this intentionally? That's bad. Ooh, you did this intentionally and it was like a pretty aggressive form of doping? That's really bad.
Yep.
Versus accidents, versus contaminations, versus unintentional ingesting or product. So I do think that education is important for all athletes and the public in general. Most people don't know what a diuretic is and why is a diuretic banned? How is it performance enhancing? Well, it's not performance enhancing, etc. So I do think that it's a learning process for all of us, and I commend the people who are willing to put in the time to continue to learn.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I learned a lot from this, and appreciate you always helping me learn more about anti-doping over the years too, Corrine. And I know you've been a leader in this regard through the PTRA and otherwise. So maybe some of my suggestions here might percolate up to that level, and we can continue to make progress on this because, as I said, we want to keep trail running in a situation where we don't ever doubt the results of the events that happen and preserve the spirit of sportsmanship that we all have grown to love about it. Transitioning to free agency here, Corrine, some big announcements.
Quick switch.
Quick switch here. Some big announcements this week, maybe headlined by Tom Evans moving from Adidas Terex, officially signing with ASICS.
Speaking of ASICS, yeah.
Yeah, a bit of a surprise. I had heard rumors about where Tom was going.
I was convinced. I was convinced he was going to On. It made sense. He'd be a big name there. They're well equipped. Huge dollars on the line. But I will say, we are a biased North American audience in which we don't give the same credence to brands like ASICS. ASICS is a way bigger brand in the UK and in Europe in general. Yep. And it's not at all really on the US market, particularly in trail running.
Japanese brand. So.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so big deal. But yeah, I had heard rumors about On. I had heard rumors about Nike, and the announcement about ASICS, I think, surprised a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, obviously a great brand fit. Tom, one of those super versatile athletes who can race on the roads. He races cross country. Obviously, he's world class on the trails. So probably a great indication that ASICS is really going to be doubling down on their trail product because their road shoes are considered, I think, among the best in the super shoe category. It's rare that, at least in North America, that you see people running trails in ASICS footwear. So signing an athlete of Tom's caliber, matching him with someone like Ben Demon, they've got a strong team. Now, if they can follow up with great product, ASICS could be a player in the market.
They could be a huge player in the market. And I think what's really interesting there too is that I think when I look at Tom, what does Tom want in a brand? What does Tom need in a brand? Tom needs to be kind of like one of the big dogs in the brand because that's what he deserves. He deserves to be a big dog. He wasn't going to go to a place like Hoka where he's amongst kind of a shrine of a number of different men. So being at a brand where he gets to be that, I think, is really critical because that's going to allow him to work on product really closely and get credit for the product that he's working on. I think that was a big kind of like up against a hard spot with Adidas where it was like not necessarily getting the credit for all the work he put into the Agravic Speed Ultra, I think. And then that's why I think like Nike wouldn't have been a good fit, right? Because Nike doesn't necessarily invest in their trail product and in their trail athletes in that same way that a company, I think like ASICS or even On would be able to provide to an athlete like Tom. So I think that was really cool. I also think that his wife, Sophie, has a relationship with ASICS. I'm pretty sure that is her run sponsor for triathlon, and the agency that Tom works with for these kind of negotiations, I believe, is a triathlon focused agency, or at least historically has been a triathlon focused agency, moving over more maybe into road, into trail. And so that connection into ASICS, I believe, has to be pretty strong. And so also makes that kind of a natural like family feeling fit.
Yeah. And Tom made his debut with ASICS. We'll get to that here in a second. But
did you see the video?
Shout out. No, from the race or from?
Yeah, he finishes. He comes across the finish line. He like does his salute and then he whips off one of the shoes. Like it's kind of muddy out, and he just like immediately like reaches down and rips off one of the shoes and has it here for that photo. And it was
what a professional. I gotta look that up.
It's great. Tom is all class.
Congratulations to Tom Evan. This is the start of a new chapter and kicking it off in triumphant fashion. We'll get to that victory here in just a second. Moving on to some of the other official confirmation news here on free agency front. Caitlin Fielder moves from Salomon to Adidas Terrex. It seems like she's kind of taking a step up in distance in her career too. She's going to be kicking her season off at the Tarawera 100K in New Zealand in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and she's raced CCC. Like, she's gone up to that 100K before, but right. I'm excited to see. And then she went back down to 50K, and now it's kind of coming back up, and I'm so excited to see her.
Yeah, she's a fantastic talent, and I think I'm excited to see, for example, Tarawera is a golden ticket race. If Caitlin Fielder secures one of those top 2 positions, might we see her at Western States? And it feels like at a time when you're changing your main partnership, your main sponsor in the sport, it's also a good time to sort of explore different aspects of the sport. And Caitlin Fielder, as you said, is no stranger to 100-kilometer distance racing, but she's been mostly focused on 50K and below. She did have a great race at Templier last fall, so a good get for Adidas Terrex.
She has that Rachel Drake quality, I think, when it comes to range. And so I always forget that Rachel Drake had run CCC before and Waldo 100K, etc. And then went back down in distance and then came back up in distance this past year. And I think Caitlin Fielder has that quality, has raced CCC, has raced Templier, and but has gone back down and is so good at that 30 to 50K distance. And now to see her come back up to 100K, maybe 100 miles, is very, very interesting.
From memory, she was just outside the top 10 of Trail Runner of the Year last year. I think she was like 12th or 13th. So shout out to Caitlin Fielder. Congratulations on the new partnership with Adidas Terrex. Kraft announced 9 athletes.
All at once.
Expanding their already very strong team. I would say it's headlined by David Sinclair, Jupiter Carrera on the men's side, and I think Mary Denholm was the only female that they announced as a new addition this year.
I think Elov, who was a Hoka athlete, very talented at the kind of fast Vasa 90 to 100K, kind of just really quick road running type stuff, road to road trail. So cool to see him on the team. Some of these individuals also were kind of, I think, on a part year contract last year, like Jupiter, like Tommy Sullivan, for example, and now are kind of officially on with a new or a longer term contract. And so good to see that. Someone did mention that seems like a lot of men, but I think if you reflect on the pre-announcement team of athletes, it is largely women. With Mimi, MK, Ida, Arroyo, etc. I think it's been largely women.
Yeah, I'm looking at their team right now on fantasy.freetrail.com, and it is well balanced in terms of men and women, but there was some criticism online during this big announcement that there was only one female in the
new signing. But I think if you look at their team in whole, actually signing a bunch of men balances their team more than if the new 9 athletes was divided, 4 women and 5 men or 5 women and 4 men. The women's team would be much more heavily skewed without kind of a couple extra guys being signed this year.
Yep. So shout out to the Kraft team. It'd be
great to
see.
Dig deeper. Come on, team.
David Sinclair landing with Kraft. That's a huge get for them, and it'll be great to see him supported in the way that he deserves, coming off, I think, 6th in Trail Runner of the Year this year, racing on the World Cup as a ski mountaineering athlete right now, and can't wait to see what he's got teed up for the trail running season. Before we move off free agency, a couple more things. Francesco Pupi added to the Hoka roster.
That's sick.
Hoka men's group is ridiculous. As you mentioned, Tom Evans maybe not wanting to join the ranks of some of these Hall of Fame athletes on the Hoka team, but Francesco Pupi, I think, fills a good hole on the Hoka roster, sort of the mid-distance specialist at this point in his career. But just some names off the top of my head for Hoka: Jim Walmsley, Hayden Hawks, Rod Farvard, Adam Peterman, Francesco Pupi, Ludovic Pomeray,
Vincent Bouliard is hopefully more than just an employee at this point. Hopefully he at least has a bonus structure added to his employment contract. But Yeah, it's a who's who. There's some very, very strong men on that team, and very excited to see Francesco be an addition to that group.
Yeah, I was going to mention Vincent too because I don't know if you saw, but Esther Chilog put up a photo of the Hoka team together in Portland, and a certain Vincent Bouillard was there, obviously dressed in his Hoka gear, but he looked a little bit more like an athlete than like an employee in this photo. So eyeball emojis galore in
Oh
the
yeah,
comment
doing
section.
doing double duty, I think for sure. I mean, he loves his job,
Yeah,
loves his job. So I don't think that is changing, but I do think that there is an incentive to have an employee who is racing at a high level also be on an athlete contract. So I think that I have to imagine having like spent some time hanging out with this crew at events over the past year. I'm sure he's sitting in a very good position with a company that understands his running needs, but also knows that he like loves his job in Annecy.
yeah. Okay, so that's some of the bigger free agency news of people who have landed. There are a couple of new free agents now that I would love to get your personal perspective on, Corinne, especially with Devin Yanko. I know you guys have a personal friendship. Devin's a friend of mine too, but certainly you guys are very close. She announced that she's no longer with Lululemon. Also, Cody Lynn announced he's no longer with Scott Sports. So feel free to add any color on Cody, but especially
Yeah.
interested in Devin.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
slid into Paul Lynn's DMs immediately, and I was like, he better be going to Terex, like eyeball emoji, because that would be a natural fit, right? I know that they've wanted him in the past and talked to him in the past, and just wasn't kind of the right time or place. But Paul's heavily invested in the team, and Cody would be a great addition to that team. So I'm hoping it's Terex. That would be amazing, I think, for him to really have that support system because he's been running more or less solo. Um, I feel like within the Scott ecosystem. So
Yep.
that would be amazing. And then Devin's news is obviously, I think we all felt pretty like beat up over that one because she did. Those women put everything into Further. They went all in on this major project. We had a lot of speculation pre, during, and post Further. Well, like, was that a good activation for Lululemon? Are they visitors? Are they here for the long haul? Are they bringing this product to market, or was that a one off? Like, what is this actually going to look like and to mean? And to me, I mean, I remember talking to Devin kind of leading into this fall, and I was like, it'd be crazy to let you guys go. Like, it'd be crazy. Like, there's still like product and research and media that needs to come out from Further. Like, they need you guys around. Like, they
Yeah.
can't just cut you guys loose. So I was blown away, like very, very sad for Devin. I think it's really easy to pile on to Lululemon for it. And it's like, I've got friends who have worked there, who do work there, um, friends who have been sponsored in different capacities by companies like Lululemon. And it can be this kind of fleeting marketing money, unfortunately, coming in and out. And it always, everyone always says it comes down to budget, right? We just don't have the budget. We just don't have the money
Yeah.
for this. And it can feel impossible to hear that because these are multi-million, multi-billion dollar companies. It's like, okay, we spent all this money on Further. We probably have some budget.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you kind of always wonder if you're getting the whole truth, right? Like, is it really budget, or is it me? I think is what we're left feeling like how is it about me? How am I the one being cut loose here? And I also wonder too, like, I think Steph has one more year on her contract, so I think she's staying put. But like, curious, like, is Leah staying? Like,
Mhm.
does she have another year on her contract? I don't know the answer to that. And so I was sad. I was really, really sad when that news came out.
Yeah. The
So
timing is unfortunate too, because she made it seem like, in mid-January, this is
I think their
being,
contracts went through kind of a weird time frame. Like, I don't think they were
oh,
December 31st. I think they were Jan 31st or even February 1st or something weird. So there was kind of a weird thing. But independent of that, this is an industry that largely, not entirely, because there will be people who are signed in like April, because that's kind of like the new like technical money calendar for most folks is kind of after tax season into April.
mhm.
But that being said, we know intrinsically as a group of trail runners that our negotiation window is August through October, generally speaking.
Yeah.
And then hopefully everything is signed by Thanksgiving or so. But so it's one of those things where it's like, technically maybe they were still within their contract limits, and that's like not insane. But in an industry where most budgets are set, most money is spent by the time you're in October, that's really harsh. Like,
Yeah.
that feels bad to me.
Yeah. Well, shout out to Devin. Of course, she has been one of the
people's hero.
Yeah, one of the most performant athletes
20 years, like
in North
19
America.
years,
Yeah.
20 years into her ultra running career, right?
20 years. And yeah, somebody who obviously people have a lot of respect for. So hopefully she lands with the right brand and it feels good to her. But yeah, some question marks there as it relates to Lulu and their long-term approach to trail and ultra running, which I think people were skeptical about from the beginning. It was great to see that further activation last year. I know you were there in person, and I mean, I was riveted and entertained by it, and it would be a shame if that was the one and done from the Lulu.
I speculate, because we're allowed to speculate on this podcast.
Sure, yeah.
I speculate like how much of their how much of Further's future media and performance stuff hinged on Camille. Like, was Camille being removed from the company? Did that like upset the balance of like Lululemon being able to like utilize this research or media, because she was kind of, I mean, I personally think the bigger story of Further was each of these women doing the most they had ever done.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't have to be the American record or the world record or whatever. Like, each of these women like stepped up and did insane things, right? Yeah. Like, that to me was what was really important and really like magical and inspirational from it, and how all their teams were helping each other's teams. That was really cool.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily about Camille setting American bests and world bests, etc. But I wonder how much of that media story, because they had film crews there, right? Like Faithy Briggs was there. It was amazing. I was like, idol moment for me getting to meet you. Courtney White bopping around taking photos. Idol moment for me. So excited to meet her.
Yeah.
But I wonder how much of that media hinged on Camille. And all of a sudden, when that's no longer in play, did that upset the
sort
ecosystem here?
Board. Yeah.
Was she the main reason why the CEO or marketing or whomever bought into being in the sport ecosystem in the first place?
Yeah.
And without that, which it shouldn't hinge on one person, because Devin's amazing, Steph's amazing, Leah's amazing. You know, the women who stepped up to run their first ever like 100K, amazing. But did it really hinge on Camille? And I wonder if that upset the like marketing ecosystem in some way.
Yeah.
But in my mind, that was like, they all of a sudden have more money in their pockets because that's not a retainer they're paying.
Right.
Like, so I don't know. I have feels.
Anyway,
it's
it's a giant organization. Yeah. And at the end of the day, these decisions are made at a much higher level than we can really understand or fathom as a couple of podcasting
talking
speculators
heads
here. So what we can say is we hope Devin lands on her feet in the right place, and she should be proud of everything that she has accomplished with Lululemon and otherwise. All right. There are still some big names to be announced. So before we move off of free agency, a few names here for our people to keep their eyes on. A certain Hannah Allgood, my coach, has not announced where she's going to be landing. Sabrina Stanley, we talked about last time we were on this podcast. She's not announced. Madalena Floria, again, a surprise leaving Solomon. It'll be interesting to see where she lands. A super talent, especially in that Golden Trail type racing. U.S. side, Darren Thomas, Chris Myers are big dogs that I'm keeping my eye on. And a certain Corrine Malcolm made an announcement that she was going to be leaving a long-term and very productive partnership with Adidas Terex to explore new horizons. So eyeball emojis, ... I don't know if there's anything you want to say, Corrine. But...
Yeah, I did want to say, because I think it's always important with these things. Like, it's contracts end, right? Like, there's an end date on our contracts. It's not like an employment contract where it's like you work until you move on or they let you go or whatever. Like, there's an end date on contracts. So I think it's really easy for us to get emotional about them. It's one of those things where it's like you don't need to like put a billboard up to say you're leaving, but I think we do. I think it's like really important to say, and I've been really like keen in this conversation to say, like, Adidas offered me a new contract because I think it's important to that team, my teammates there, that team, the team of managers who are amazing. Like, they offered me a new contract and I turned it down to take on a different opportunity that involves both like an employment opportunity and being a runner. And so it was one of those things where it's like, I'm sad to leave them. Like, I'm
Yeah.
so excited for Caitlin Fielder to be on that team because I was
How
like,
great is that?
Danny
Yeah.
Moreno and Caitlin together is like a dream. So I'm on one hand like cheering on all these people on my old team, but really excited about my new kind of job opportunity and my new running opportunity. And so, but I think it's important to say like, no, Adidas wanted to keep me. I broke their hearts and my management team's hearts because they were like, we're so sad, but also so excited for you, both
Yeah, well, see,
professionally and personally.
and how great is that? I'm so glad you brought that up, Corinne. You
Yeah.
know, oftentimes we assume that the divorces between brand and athletes are done with, sort of, I don't know, there's animosity between the two parties. And a lot of cases, it is in your case, especially, it's like, wow, new horizons, new opportunity, a chance to grow and progress. And it's better done in a different environment, but no hard feelings to Tarek.
Yeah.
So that's great, and it's amazing that they gave you the opportunity to continue with them if that's what felt right to you. And I'll be excited to talk with you publicly about this new this new opportunity when the time
Yeah.
is right.
Well, it's nice because we do have racing on the horizon. I think Tom's announcement came out because he was racing Arc of Attrition. We've got things like Black Canyon on the horizon, Tarawera on the horizon, all these races that are going to force announcements, I think. And so
Yeah,
we should know, it's January 25th while we're recording this. I think we'll know by the end of the first week of February where some of these big names are going,
yeah,
as we just kind of build into those next set of like hype races.
yeah. Okay, cool. Perfect segue. Because racing is now underway, Corinne. Holy smokes, did we not have a big break this year? At least it didn't feel like that to me. It's January. We had the Hong Kong 100K take place last weekend to begin the Gran Canaria World Trail Majors, and now
Long
the
and
UT
short.
long and short. We can talk about that, but maybe we'll start with the beginning of the UTMB World Series while we're on the subject of Tom here. I'm going to share my screen like a professional podcaster here, Corinne. And this is a tweet from Adrian Stott, who was sort of covering the Cornwall Arc of Attrition by UTMB over there in the UK, where Tom just debuted as an A6 athlete and kicked things off on the right foot. Looks like he ran 6:54.50, lowering the course record by close to 45 minutes.
Wow.
So I'm not sure how long that race has been around, but this is its first year as a by UTMB event. Here's a photograph of Tom again, compliments of Adrian Stott. And then on the women's side, Elsie Davis, a standout.
Who Tom is coaching.
Oh, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, great.
I have an elite men's group for the most part. Tom is an elite women's group, and Elsie Davis is a member of that Tom cohort, I believe now.
Okay, awesome.
So a newer relationship, but I believe that Elsie's being coached by Tom now.
Great. And it looks like she lowered the course record by close to 25 minutes there, running 7:55.48. So big early results by two UK athletes, Elsie Davis and Tom Evans. Anything you want to add there, Corinne?
I was going to say lowering Fiona Pascal's record is also no easy feat. Fiona, I've talked to Beth about Fiona, and Beth has said, I'm never going to be as fast as Fiona is going to be, type of thing. So cool to see Elsie take Fiona's time down a bit more. But I just think it's exciting. I think Elsie and her wife are due to have a baby soon, too.
Whoa.
Like, I don't know when the due date is or if they've already had the little one, but I'm pretty sure Elsie's wife is pregnant. So that's also very exciting. New moms on the horizon.
Awesome. I'm excited to see what Elsie has going on this year. Of course, she had a
Mega talent.
Disappointing run at Western States last year. So anyway, kicking things off on the right foot here in January at the Arc of Attrition, and the UTMB World Series is officially underway. Holy smokes.
Mm-hmm.
Quickly, Hong Kong 100K, it was dominated by Sunmaya Budo and Guangfu Meng, who both broke the course records at what is a very old race at this point.
But did you notice anything about the short race?
I didn't.
There is a scary for all of us, FYI.
Oh,
there is
no.
another Buddha in the mix. Rammaya Buddha, who I'm assuming appears to be a younger sibling or a younger family member of
smokes.
the very talented Sunmaya Buddha, won the 54K or whatever the short distance is there, in outstanding fashion. And so we Sorry, guys. I think Sunmaya Buddha is going to be one of those front runners for CCC, and maybe Remmaya Buddha is going to be one of the front runners for OCC, and that would be insane.
Yeah, I did take a peek at the results of the long race, and Sunmaya Buddha won easily, broke the course record. I think second place was 25 minutes behind her. I think third place was close to an hour
And it
behind
wasn't a weak
Sunmaya.
field by any means. It was
No,
a good Asia Pacific field.
and especially with the ascendance of Chinese trail and ultra running, like there's a lot of people on the men's and women's top 10 who I've never heard of, but who obviously are very talented Chinese athletes. Over many years, Corinne, you and I have talked about the ascendancy of Chinese athletes and how much more we're going to be talking about them, especially at these big races. I've been to the Hong Kong 100 once.
Same. I found you on a rock.
Yeah, that's right. We were there together.
You were calling Harmony from a rock, and I was having a horrible day too, and
Yes.
I kept running, and I saw Harmony, and I was like, "Don't worry, Dylan's just back there a little ways."
That was way before we were close friends and collaborators in the way that we are today. That's a funny memory to bring up here on the pod. Anyway, racing is underway here. And before we close down, I want to look forward a little bit because you and I, we got to tease a couple of things that we have coming up where we're going to be working together. But number one, I got to promote my own race. The Gorge Waterfalls 100K is going to be nasty this year. For those who don't know
nasty
about Gorge Waterfalls, it's a race that's been around for a long time. It used to be owned by James Varner and Rain Shadow Running. There was a big fire. We had the opportunity to acquire the race from James. This will be our fourth year as co-race directors with Daybreak Racing this year, and we were lucky to receive the Team USA qualifier for the World Championship, which is going to be taking place at the end of September in Spain. And as a result, there is a wildly talented men's and women's field coming to all three races, but especially the 100K. So I just want to tick through a few names here. Mr. David Roche just jumped in yesterday, Corinne.
Nice.
Holy smokes. Then we've got Adam Peterman, John Ray. We've got last year's winner, Adam Loomis. We've got Ryan Miller. We've got Caleb Olson, fifth place at Western States, Darren Thomas,
Matt
Nick
Seidel.
Handel, Matt Seidel. A golden ticket level race, I feel like, here that I'm getting extremely excited about. And then
used to be a golden ticket race.
Yeah, and the women's side is even more exciting.
Yeah.
Erin Clark, Katie Asmuth, Leah Yingling, Claire Rhodes, Rachel Drake, Shea Aquilano, Heather Jackson, Jane Mouse, Addie Bracey, Rachel Lemke, Lauren Piretz, Jade Bellsberg, Hillary Allen, Brittany Peterson making a comeback. What do we think about Gorge, Corinne?
Can Jade qualify for both the U.S. and or Canadian team? Because I think she's represented Canada in the past.
That's a good question.
I don't know.
Maybe she's just coming for the battle and not necessarily for.
Could be. It is driving distance for them. I think they live up in BC now, so they.
Yeah,
Jade does not like flying.
Partner Nicodemus is coming too. He's racing.
Yeah,
also.
Jade is not a flyer. Does not like flying. It is anxiety provoking. So races that are drivable, right up their alley.
Anyway, I want to petition the American Trail Running Association to give us 3 tickets. I'm like, give us a super golden ticket type designation here for Team USA qualifier.
Based on what happened with Lake Sonoma when it was the qualifier for Austria, I do think if the athletes who just missed there applied, they were almost guaranteed to be named to that Worlds team. So I do think that while it's not officially a third spot, those athletes will have I think an elevated position when it comes to deciding by resume.
All right.
So I'm not a voter on that team, but having been on 2 Worlds teams and having seen selections in the past, I do think taking part in the selection process, unless you're like a Jim Walmsley, does prioritize you a little bit versus someone who did not make it to that qualification race and is just submitting a resume.
Great. Yeah, good point. I mean, I'm thrilled that all these athletes would come to our event. We're very much looking forward to hosting them.
It's a wild weekend. That's Gorge weekend.
Lake Sonoma
and Desert Rats are all that weekend. So if you're not doing Lake Sonoma 50 or Gorge 100K, you are probably doing the 50K at Desert Rats looking for your UTMB qualifier.
Yeah. Big weekend in trail running. The way too
Nasty.
early preview of the Gorge Waterfalls 100K taking place here at the end of January 2025.
Gotta toot our own horns, you know?
A lot to be excited about. One last thing to get excited about before we go here, Corrine. You and I are going to be working together closely here in just a couple of weeks. We got back-to-back golden ticket race weekends where Freetrail's taking the show on the road. You want to tease it for the honor? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy that you're going home in between, but Ryan and I figured out how to fly as efficiently as possible from Phoenix, Arizona to Auckland, New Zealand for what will be the worst but best 12 days of my life, from arriving in Phoenix, Arizona to cover Black Canyon, which will have an amazing 100K field and an amazingly stacked 50K field. That weekend's going to be insane. And then you go home for like 48 hours while Ryan and I fly Hawaiian Air through Honolulu to get to Auckland in time to be on the ground there, to do pre-shows for Tarawera. The 100K is looking really good. You and I were both sent the start list. 50K is looking really good as well. We've got some bangers in the 100 mile, but it's going to be a good golden ticket race. The fields aren't going to be quite as big from a depth perspective as Black Canyon, but the fields are still very, very good. So I think we're going to have a great story to chase. Super golden ticket at Black Canyon, where 3 tickets are on the line for men and women, including an interesting group of athletes who do not need a ticket, which we'll talk about more at a future date. And then Tarawera, where I do think everyone on that start line probably wants a ticket. You're making the journey there. You might as well get the ticket and take it all the way home. So that will be very interesting. Unless Helen Mino Faulkner is going to give up her second ticket in a row, which could happen, I guess. We'll find out.
No, we need Helen Mino at Western States, but no pressure.
No pressure, Helen.
We'll do those official previews later on. A couple details just to add to what Corrine just said. I'm so pumped. We're kicking it off this year, and at Black Canyon, we're going to do what we did at Javelina, where we're collabing with our friends at Mountain Outpost. So we're going to be doing what we're calling the shakeout shows. There, we'll obviously be making more announcements about what our viewers and listeners can expect at Black Canyon. And then, at Tarawera, first time doing a trailgating show down there, down under, so to speak. I've been to Tarawera twice myself. I'm very much looking forward to getting back and seeing my Kiwi friends and doing our shows there. And Corrine, as I teased at the beginning of our conversation here today, breaking news.
Are you and I racing Tarawera?
A certain Debo is signed up for the 50K at Tarawera.
Are we duking it out in the 50K?
So you're going to run.
They told me that they would let me into whatever race I want to do. Okay. And so I said, I'm going all the way to New Zealand. I should probably run something. So tentatively, I would like to be in the 50K if I'm feeling up to it.
I'm running the 50K. I can't wait.
I got to do a long run tomorrow.
Yeah. So I ran 18 miles today, cramming for the exam.
We're ready.
I've got like 10 days to train here.
Ryan can do all the media work for us on Saturday, and you and I will just go do a fun 50K.
I'm psyched about it. I have no business signing up for a 50K right now, but it'll be a great training for checking out. At least that's what I'm thinking about it. And also Hayden Hawks is in the 50K. So I was thinking it would be fun, Corrine, if we do a prediction about how much Hayden beats me by.
Is there a good enough age gap to do an age graded thing? Like pull a Des Linden and be like, I've got to beat Dakota by so much.
Let's just do straight up, Okay. You can think about it. We don't need to make our predictions now, but Hayden's got to spot me like 30 to 45 minutes, and then we have a race. Okay.
Okay. I think we'll bring Liam into this. I think we can figure out a very interesting time back situation for you between you and Hayden. That could be very, very interesting.
Yeah, okay. Liam, Aid Station Fireball, get on that. You can do a data analysis of our respective levels of fitness to arrive at what would be an appropriate handicap for the nearly 39-year-old Debo taking on one of the world's best, Hayden Hawks, and many others at Tarawera. No, I can't wait. It's going to be really fun. And
I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be great to do our shows down there together.
Yeah.
Anything else for the audience, Corrine, that felt like a fun recap of some of the stuff that's happening in the sport?
No, I mean, it's on. That's all I can think about is that it's on. We are about to hit the ground running for the kind of the final golden ticket chase. There's 4 golden ticket races left. Black Canyon and Tarawera being back to back is pretty exciting. That's 5 spots to men, 5 spots to women going in about a 10-day window, which feels like a lot. And then obviously Chianti coming up down the road a little bit before you and I think, circle the wagons back up for Canyons 100K in Auburn. So
Yep.
the Blitz is on. It's going to be Western States before you know it.
Don't even say it. No, I can't wait. I can't wait. It's a privilege to be able to do what we do for a living.
Are you running Chuckanut? Was that like a slip?
I'm running Chuckanut.
I don't know. Is that public news?
Yeah, we talked about it on the last pod.
Oh, did we?
Think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Am I doing bottle hand ups for you?
You're more than welcome to. That's for sure. Yeah.
I generally take like 6 to 8 bottles from people, and I'll be at the 10K mark to do bottles there, and we'll communicate. Hannah and I will figure out your bottle plan.
Yeah. No, I'm psyched. It's obviously a classic North American event that I've never
Have you been
done.
to Bellingham?
I've never been to Bellingham. So yeah, it's going to be
one of
fun.
My homes. And I'm so excited.
Actually, speaking of Aid Station Fireball, Liam sent me the start list for Chuckanut, and it's nasty. Yeah. Also nasty.
Yeah, it's one that you kind of have to weed through because they're not on ultra sign up, I believe. So it's it's a little bit more like you have to get into the weeds to figure it all out. But it should be a really good field. I do know someone like Danny Moreno is not going to be on that start list, unfortunately. She's taken a slower entry into the season, having to have gotten a PRP for her foot, but it seems like she's green lights and back to running this week or last week, which is awesome, but bummed that she is having to delay the start to her season a little bit.
Yeah. Well, shout out to Danny. She'll be a force whenever she gets healthy again, but we'll have to figure out my handicapping for Chuckanut also for the men's race.
I'm excited. This is going to be great. This is an excellent spring.
We're back. I told you, Corrine, I'm making a comeback. Don't look now, but I got 250Ks coming up in the next 6 weeks.
We got to figure out our Hard Rock qualifier this year too, okay?
Yeah.
Let's talk. Yeah.
First things first, Corrine. I can't be talking about Hard Rock yet. I'm still scarred. All right. That was super fun. You're amazing. The best. Thanks for jumping back on the horn. And I love doing these newsy shows with you. So let's make a habit out of it.
Yeah. Talking heads for everyone. I dig it.
All right. Talk soon.